This story revolves around decommissioned police guns that were no longer in service, plus guns handed in by the public to the police during an amnesty period after 1994. You see, this amnesty was a government initiative in an attempt to decrease gun violence in South Africa and have better gun control measures. And thirdly, guns that were seized by police during crime scenes, which were kept in evidence rooms around police stations in Gauteng. All of these guns were kept at an armory in Vereeniging, waiting to be destroyed, but found their way to the Cape Flats. Now we're talking around 9,000 guns dumped in the Cape Flats to cause mayhem and destruction, not only to communities but to families as well.
Is this the gun that you use to kill people?
Yes, this is the gun we use to kill people, and there's many more others.
And how often would you kill people?
Like every day we kill people.
You see, this case is one single event that caused so many deaths of young men in the Western Cape, and nobody is really talking about it.
Heavily armed police kept a close eye on more than 31,000 firearms that were destroyed in Vereeniging on Thursday. The arms, ranging from rocket-propelled grenade launchers, AK-47s and pistols, were seized during police operations. Some were voluntarily handed in by licensed owners. Provincial Commissioner of Gauteng, Lieutenant General Mzwandile Petros, said the arms were enough to keep an army in battle for a sustained period of time. Petros said while Gauteng ranked high in violent and serious crimes, there has been a reduction in murders committed with guns.
Now, the campaign of Gun-Free SA traces its roots back to the months before South Africa's first democratic election in 1994. You see, guns had proliferated in the hands of different political factions and groups, claiming they were needed for self-defense. But now, the unarmed majority lived in fear on trains, taxis, in the streets, or even in their homes. Now, there was a real concern that there might be a military coup or a civil war. Now, it was in this charged environment that the seed for Gun-Free SA was planted, with a campaign for civilians to hand in their guns for destruction. The campaign movers were members of the religious subcommittees involved in the National Peace Accord that played a significant role in the birth of a democratic South Africa.
We know that in the past there have been indemnities for illegal weapons, and we know that the results have been disappointing. We have tried to offer an opportunity today which may make it easier for people with illegal weapons to hand them in.
You see, Mandela and other high-profile figures were pushing for this campaign in the country, and people handed in their weapons in truck loads. I mean, there were so much guns which were handed in to the police during that period.
Take your guns, your knives, and your pangas and throw them into the sea.
Now, a senior officer and a gun expert at the SAPS was responsible for the destruction of these guns. Some guns were destroyed, but over a period of time, the officer and some of his colleagues saw an opportunity to make millions selling these guns back to the streets, and their target was the Cape Flats. Prinsloo admitted to selling around 2,000 guns, but some reports say the number is much higher. It could be a little over 9,000 guns sold to gang bosses in the Cape Flats. This was a syndicate ran by corrupt cops, and it was reported that at the same time, some police officers in Gauteng were involved in helping gang bosses with criminal records to get gun licenses in a corrupt manner. You see, these guys were running a one-stop shop. You get your gun license and your guns at the same time. Now, Chris Prinsloo was working for the SAPS for more than 35 years. He was gunning for the brigadier position at some point in his career when he was overlooked in favor of a black cop, and he was sent to work at an armory in Vereeniging. And it is said that could have been one of the reasons why he decided to enrich himself at an expense of the state and kids dying in the Cape Flats by flooding the streets with guns. Now, Prinsloo was working with another officer, DC Naidu, in this operation. They picked out guns in good condition and only destroyed the bad ones. It is said that their first destination was KZN, selling to taxi bosses, but they soon realized that with the number of gangs in existence in Cape Town, that could be a more profitable market. Now, to not get his hands dirty, Prinsloo found a middleman who could connect the guns and the buyers and facilitate the sales without having to meet face to face with the kingpins himself. Now enter Ellen Waves, an arms dealer who's accused of paying 1 million rands to Prinsloo and Naidu to steal firearms and ammunition. He is also charged with theft of about 400 rifles as well as firearm parts. Now another accused is a Cape Town businessman, Ishat Lahar, who is said to have purchased guns from Prinsloo and is currently on a 100,000 rands bail. Now both these guys are charged with supplying stolen police firearms to criminal gangs. Now court documents have revealed that investigators believe 1,066 murders were carried out using the stolen firearms between 2010 and 2014.
Identifying certain role players who were involved in this, and systematically, through the assistance of crime intelligence and project investigations from our side, focused on building the case piece by piece against these individuals.
Police say the areas where the weapons were supplied have continued to be the source of intense violence over the past few years. The state did not oppose bail.
He's facing 8 charges, which include corruption, money laundering, the theft of firearms, the selling of firearms to persons who were not supposed to have those firearms.
Some say after the first gang bought the guns, the middlemen still had negotiating power, but after all the gang bosses knew who the connect was, the situation quickly turned into an extortion-like transaction, cause now the gang had a lot of guns on them, and it is rumored that the connect was somewhat threatened to sell the guns at a lower price. I guess selling guns is a tricky business, especially when they know where you stay. Now once the guns were in the hands of the gangs, that's when the dynamics of gang violence changed in Cape Town. You see, the environment became more hostile and brutal. It went from guns being scarce and available to gangs, where only OG members of the gangs had guns, to every Tom, Dick and Harry owning one. Now gun violence quadrupled over time, and the loss of life for young men in the Cape Flats became a norm. There was numerous setbacks in bringing the matter to trial, including the assassination of Lahar's legal representative, Pete Mihalik, outside a private school in Greenpoint in 2018. Now Rafe's lawyer prior to Mihalik was Nuruddin Hassan, who was married in 2016. You see, Nuruddin also represented Lahar, and both these lawyers represented Cape Town gang bosses as clients at some point. Now, if Raves and Lahar were to be found guilty of this case, they could be facing a possibility of life in prison. You see, gangs operate in a similar way all over the world. They evolve out of a particular political economy, which usually involves the breaking up of communities. They require the recruitment of young men, and their central business is the drug trade. But an important feature is the control of territory, for which guns are required. Now, through drug money, the gang bosses can diversify and launder their cash with other businesses like taxis, taverns, properties, and many more. But guns are at the heart of these operations. You see, to protect the theft, the drugs, and the ill-gotten wealth. You see, access to guns allowed gangs control over larger areas to sell drugs and also increasing their cash flow. You see, Prinsloo put gang wars on steroids with the influx of guns. You see, this influx went on from 2007 to 2016 when Prinsloo was arrested. Now, the value of all the guns stolen could have been around 9 million, and Prinsloo is said to have made around 2 million, but it is rumored that it could have been more. One day after a shooting in Menenberg, a gang member was found with a decommissioned police gun, and the officer pressed the gang member to tell him how he got hold of this gun. Now, to quickly get himself out of trouble, the gang member snitched and he told where the guns came from. Now, the officer realized that there was a gun syndicate in the police force and he couldn't trust anyone with this information. Now, he investigated this issue and only spoke to one superior that he knew for sure wasn't a dirty cop. That's how Prinsloo and the Vereeniging Police Armory was uncovered. The investigation was launched in December 2013 in the Western Cape by police officers Major General Jeremy Verey and Major General Peter Jacobs. Now, Verey was fired over a Facebook post and Jacobs had faced court battles over his position in the police. Basically, the police wanted to get rid of these guys for spoiling the party. Now, they both later won their cases in court. The court found that the decisions were politically motivated. It is said that with so many dirty cops involved in this case, the police force was divided into two factions. The late officer Shal Kaner was said to be one of the police officers investigating these guns, and also the handing over of gun licenses to gang bosses with criminal records in the Western Cape. Now, Officer Kaner was gunned down in front of his house in Bishop Lavis. Now, this is after guards were removed from his house, even after it was discovered that his life was under threat. Now, some speculate big police bosses are in bed with gang bosses. That's why prosecution of these cases is slow or non-existent. Now, it was reported that because of Prinsloo, at least 1,000 deaths were caused directly from these guns. Now, with so many people dying, you would think this story would be front page news in most publications, but nobody really covered this story exclusively until the Mail and Guardian and Mark Shaw started looking into the story. Now, Chris Prinsloo was convicted and sentenced in 2016 on 20 charges ranging from racketeering, corruption and money laundering relating to the smuggling and dealing of these guns worth around 9 million. He is said to have been released on parole in April of 2020. Yeah, it is said that he has turned state witness now to assist investigators to understand where these weapons went. And this is all alleged.